NFFC drafts are done. In both drafts, wide receivers were hot and heavy early on, Chris. What do you think about this prevailing trend?
I understand why. Peter Shankey did a study that showed that actually receivers, not only are they safer than running backs because running backs get hurt more, but after like the first 5 running backs, actually receivers out-earn running backs even on the same level. Like receiver 10 out-earns running back 10 these days in a PPR league. So, not only do you need 3 receivers instead of 2 running backs, but also they're safer and they earn more points. So you understand why it's happening, but it gets to a point where the 7th or 8th receiver is going around where the 7th and 8th running back goes, and at some point you take a running back. At some point you switch. In my particular
and in fact, my draft, wide receiver 11 went before running back 6. I ended up with running back 4 and Matt Forte at the 6th spot, and running back 6 at the 7th spot in the 2nd round. It was that hot and heavy on running backs. I mean, on wide receivers.
Yeah, but why? But that's your running back 6, obviously, is DeMarco Murray. But maybe it's the average is running back 8 or 10. Or I don't know what the ADP is for Murray in the NFFC. But either way, I mean, there is a point at which the running back becomes the value. Now, was I there? Should I have taken Julio Jones over Eddie Lacy? I really like Eddie Lacy. I mean, I think Eddie Lacy. I think Charles and McCoy are kind of in their own tier, and then you have Forte and Peterson who have a little bit more mileage on them that I'm a little nervous about, and then Lacy is favorable to them in terms of, he's only in his 2nd year in the league and he's on a really good team. And so I think actually Lacy may be better now. Lacy's not going to catch as many passes as Forte, and Peterson's a once-in-a-generation type of back, so I get it. But so I felt that was good value, but at the same time, maybe I should have taken Julio Jones, and I actually probably would have taken Julio Jones at 9 had I realized that Jordy Nelson wasn't coming back to me at 2.4. I ended up getting DeMarco Murray, just like you did in the 2nd round, because I would have had to take Alshon Jeffrey, and I wasn't ready to go to that next tier of receiver. I wanted a number 1 receiver in a top offense, not a number 2 receiver. So I just felt like, all right, well, give me a back that catches passes, especially in Linehan's offense. He'll probably catch even more passes if he stays healthy, and he gets the goal line carries, and he's really the only game in town also in Dallas.
Right, and the way it worked out in my draft is the wide receivers. I mean, we powered through middle of running a wide receiver 2 before we were starting running back 2, or that's analogous tier. But I had the same decision, number 6 overall. Demaryius Thomas is gone. That was my goal. I picked 6 in KDS, hoping I get Demaryius Thomas there, and then maybe get another good receiver on the way back. And then the way these drafts have evolved, that didn't close to happening. Demaryius Thomas went 4th. I had the choice between Dez Bryant and Matt Forte. I think I might have been better off taking Dez Bryant the way it worked out.
Right, because it's not just what the guy will do. When you got Forte at 6 and you didn't really want him there, you said, yeah, I guess I got to do it. And Tom Kessenich was like, that's a great value. It's a gift. And you're like, I'm not sure I want that gift, because given the inflation with receivers, and you could see it from my draft on Monday, you knew that running backs would fall. You got Spiller in the 4th round, right? I mean, that's totally fine. If you knew you were getting Murray in the 2nd and Spiller in the 4th, then you probably take Dez Bryant there, right? Because you're getting 2 backs you like already, and so why be thin at receiver if you don't have to? It just becomes a point where, does it get so ridiculous that you have to take Forte at 6, that you have to take Lacy at 9, that you have to pass on Jeffrey at 2.4 because it's just, he just doesn't score enough points given that he's basically like the 1A but kind of the number 2 receiver in that Chicago offense.
Right, and yeah, maybe you do, and that's just the thing. I think that 1st round was the real choice, because I did feel like I did not want to take the next wide receiver down. I thought there's a significant enough drop there. I would have been a lot better off. I would have had either, I would have had Dez Bryant, and I still would have gotten Murray, or maybe I would have gotten Gio Bernard or whatever. It would have been one of those 2, and it wouldn't have been that much of a difference there. And I would be better. I'd have Dez Bryant and Victor Cruz versus Victor Cruz and 2 steps down, basically. Jeremy Maclin, Torrey Smith, those guys, Eric Decker. I'm going to be scrambling, I think, a little bit. I'm going to have decisions. The whole point of loading up on these wide receivers early is you get these 3, 4 guys, you just put them in, and you sleep peacefully. Those guys are in there every week.
Yeah, what's interesting, though? I mean, you're going to make worse decisions when you're matching receivers at the bottom of your lineup, and that's fine. But you may get lucky, make good decisions. And it's so funny because everyone's like, oh, I crushed you in this draft. Like, okay, we'll see. We'll see what happens in the real season. I was looking at the team, and I'm like, all right, I've got my running backs are Eddie Lacy and DeMarco Murray. My flex is Bishop Sankey, who I really like, as a guy who can catch passes and do a lot as a potential starting running back. We'll see if he beats out Sean Green. And then I have Gronkowski and Nick Foles, who I really like. And then I have Josh Gordon, who may beat the rap or get a 4-game suspension, and Harvin. And then that last receiver spot is kind of sketchy. Anybody can get hurt. People say, well, Harvin might get hurt too. And then, what are you going to do then? What if Gordon's suspended? Yeah, there's some risk. But Adrian Peterson might get hurt. Anyone can get hurt. Is Harvin a bigger risk that he's healthy 100% now from a hip thing that's not a chronic thing or something that he had before? Is he a bigger risk than your typical 250 to 290 carry running back? Maybe he is. The migraine headaches are gone, and those were sort of a nagging thing, but didn't really cost him much time. It was really one bad injury a couple years ago and then the hip injury last year. Maybe those are just things that aren't lingering anymore. Maybe he's no more of a risk than any other player, and he's just happened to have a bunch of injuries. So I don't know. I think sometimes we look on paper and we get nervous about our team. And look, I wasn't totally pleased with it. I was hoping that in round 4 I got someone better than Harvin, but it just where I drafted it wasn't happening. But with the volatility we have in the NFL, as long as you're not drafting so out of step with the top 6 rounds that pretty much the same guys go, I think it's on the margin sometimes, whether you went with a couple running backs or a couple receivers. It may help to go with receivers given the new climate, and I certainly would love to do that. But it's hard for me to get too concerned about where the team is now. I just feel like, okay, this is how it fell to me. Not optimal necessarily, but we'll see how it plays out. We'll make the moves that are necessary. I'm going to target receivers during the free agent pickups a little more aggressively. I'm going to figure out where the weaknesses are.
Right. The other thing that we did is we drafted way early, before all but 2 teams played a single preseason game.
Right.
Meaning that there's a lot of things that we don't know right now that we might get bargains because of that, but there will other be guys in the end game that we wouldn't have thought about drafting that are going to be super valuable as we get closer, and we won't have access to those guys for 1 week. The good news is nobody gets to do any fab until after week 1, so it kind of balances a little, but it kind of doesn't. But in a way, say Arian Foster gets hurt, and we figure out who the guy is after Andre Brown. Is it Blue? Is it Cornette? Is it someone else? Is it Johnson? That sort of battle hasn't been resolved yet. Hasn't come close to being resolved yet. But there's some possible upside there too.
Yeah, there definitely is, and the people drafting in September in the same online championship will have an advantage there. But the disadvantage they have is everything's more known. So there's less volatility. I could have a team with monsters, right? If Gordon is not suspended, and I got him in the 5th round, suddenly I've got a player that they're going to have to take in the 1st or 2nd round. Or if he's suspended 4 games, I'll take him in the 2nd or 3rd round. If Gronkowski looks like he's 100% and playing in preseason games, well then again, I got him in the 3rd round. He might be a 2nd round pick. There's volatility that they can't benefit from. So it's possible for one of the teams early on to get a stacked team in a way that it's not impossible for one of us later on, because stuff happens during the season that changes everything also, but that is no longer possible. There's values now that are no longer possible later. So I would almost rather draft early, given that there's an overall grand prize.
I think the more prepared you are, the better off, the earlier you want to be. I agree with that. Yeah. One other thing we want to talk about. You did an interesting blog entry yesterday. It's a little bit of a parody. You talked about your 70 sleepers.
It's actually more. I just said 70 because I guessed and I counted. It's more like 85 or 100.
Right, but even better. It illustrates your point even farther. And for those who don't do satire very well, explain your point.
Yeah, obviously I don't have 70 sleepers. People were saying stuff like, hey, I want to see who you don't like because you seem to like everybody. Obviously, they're not I even wrote in the article for those who read it. They're not my guys. These aren't my sleepers. These are all the guys I've read listed as a sleeper on one site or another, whether it's ours or other sites like RotoViz. They seem to come out with new sleepers every second to the point where I'm getting a headache from it. It's like, dude, everybody's not a sleeper, okay? Everybody's not the guy you have to have. 10 guys you have to have, 10 wide receivers you have to have in the rounds 5 to 8. Well, I can't have to have everybody. My roster's only so big, right? And same running backs you must draft. They do have a couple must avoids, but then there's 5 different, 20 different people tell you to avoid the, 20 different guys. The point is, look, everybody has an ADP of where they're at for reasons. For there's information on them. They're going to have some kind of role. They have some kind of skills. They have some kind of team that may give them the ball, may block for them. Things could change. There's a case to be made for and against everybody. The sum total of that push between for and against shows up in the ADP. That's what the market is, okay? I don't need to have, sleepers and busts for every single player. I get the case. We do write-ups for all the players in the magazine. We write what could happen and what the strengths are, what the weaknesses are. As you go further down the list, there's more weaknesses than strengths. But there's some guys have more upside. I'm fine with the idea of sleepers. I write about sleepers. I talk about the guys I like. I'm just getting sleeper fatigue, okay? Called insomnia, okay? I'm sick of it. It's just too many guys. And I just wrote, there's a list of 20 guys that I've heard of not on any sleeper list. And then just today, I saw Steven Jackson and Jonathan Stewart listed as sleepers at number fire. Now I'm like, all right, that's 2 guys off the list. I guarantee everybody's somebody's sleeper. And the reason everyone's
when everybody's a sleeper, nobody's a sleeper.
Right.
That's what, as a parody from The Incredibles, but yeah.
Yeah, well, everybody knows, it's right. Everybody is just in the ADP grid, and they're valued for upside and downside. And some players are more volatile than others, although I would argue that running backs are almost any running back can be a monster. I mean, Sean Moreno and Fred Jackson were great last year. Anybody can be a running back and do well. As long as you're getting carries and goal line carries on a decent team, any running back can be valuable. I remember Ricky Williams when he was 31 years old. He was the backup to somebody, Ronnie Brown or somebody. Ronnie Brown gets hurt, and Ricky Williams has 13 touchdowns and 1,200 yards. And I was I could not believe anyone drafted Ricky Williams. I remember in the 12th round when someone took him in the league, I was why would you bother? Why would you even draft him? And of course, last year I thought that about Fred Jackson. Why would you draft 32-year-old Fred Jackson? This year I'm why would you draft 33-year-old Fred Jackson? The thing is, any running back can do well because it's all situational for running backs. Receivers, there needs to be a little bit more skill-based. But remember, these are NFL players. They're not guys, in your elementary school where the scrub is just a scrub and you can't catch. I mean, all these guys are good. You never know, who's going to emerge somewhere. Obviously, size and speed matter, but everybody most of that's priced in. Justin Hunter is going in the 8th round. Jordan Matthews is going in the 8th round. The big, fast guys are going. There's no, Stephen Hill is the only big fast guy that goes late because he was so inept the last couple of years. But pretty much most people know this stuff. So it's I'm kind of sick of all the sleeper stuff, the sleeper talk. I just want to be well, there's some few guys that you can see the case for that other people may not see it quite as strongly. And if in your particular draft they slip, you take them. That's pretty much it. And I can't be too wedded to them. I like Aaron Dobson. I like the situation. I like the fact that he's still a little dinged up and it's kind of holding down his value. If he was making big plays in camp, he'd probably be in the 7th or 6th round already. I like some of the guys I like, and if they're there at a good price, they'll be there, but they might not. And I don't feel strongly about there's a must-have guys you must draft. There's a lot of guys that could be good, and so I'm sure I'll have my guys. Dobson's one of them I've drafted. Josh Gordon, I think this whole thing is I have him on every team. I think the value is great in the 5th round, especially in an NFFC style draft where winner takes a huge prize. I think you should be very aggressive on Josh Gordon. I took him in the 5th. You should have taken him in the 6th. You didn't. Even if he's suspended for the whole year, I'm going to maintain that you should have taken him in the 6th, just gamble-wise. I don't mind Torrey Smith there, but I just think that's the way you win the league and win the whole thing. So.
Yeah, I think you're right about that, especially because it's a 10-man bench. I mean, I have all the room in the world to stash him.
Right.
That's the one I'm going to kick myself. And also, I kick myself on that again, second time, because I didn't get a receiver the first couple of rounds. Because I got shut out on the elite wide receivers. That was my chance to get one, and I blew it. And I fully acknowledge that. That was a huge regret. The second I didn't get him, I thought, okay, I can wait one more round, and then I can get him. Because I got to get somebody that plays right now. I got to get Torrey Smith. Well, there you go.
Well, here's the issue, right? If you had taken Des Bryant, you would have taken Josh Gordon probably because you wouldn't have felt the necessity of putting in a full-time guy like Smith in that slot, right?
Right.
So, doing what you were supposed to in round 1 kind of cost you Josh Gordon. Now, Gordon may be suspended for the whole year, and you'll be like, okay, good. But I think, whatever the outcome is of this, I think, philosophically, you still agree, you probably should have been more aggressive. And that's what happened with me. It's I didn't take Julio Jones, which maybe I should have, and I thought Jordy Nelson might fall, but I didn't. And maybe I should have taken Victor Cruz in round 3 instead of Gronk, but I still took Gordon in round 5, even though it might screw me, it might sink me, right? I mean, if he gets suspended for the year or even for 8 games, I'm going to be really thin at receiver. My team might really suck, right? I mean, it's possible.
Right.
Or Dobson may pan out, and Kelvin Benjamin may be good, or Marquise Lee, who I like, may be good, and it doesn't matter. It's just so situational. I mean,
Then again, the super typhoon could rise up and go 20 miles inland and wipe us all out anyhow, so it's okay.
Well, if it goes like 8 miles inland, I'll have beachfront, so you got to look at the bright side. I'm looking at what could go right with the typhoon. You're looking at
that's right.
I'm not saying I'm be comfortable with beachfront if I knew that a super typhoon just wiped out 8 miles worth of people to get to me, but I would say while it lasted, it would be nice. But I guess the point is, I don't want to just say, look, the market knows best, because I don't think that. I think you need to go with your own judgment calls. You need to pick out your guys to an extent, but there is a case for and against everybody, and if you lawyer it well enough, and a lot of they're like stock screeners on the road. It's like price to earnings, earnings this year, growth in the last whatever. You could do that with stocks. There's programs you can do that in with, and you pick out the 8 stocks that fit these criteria, and you go buy them. But I think a lot of that stuff is just priced in already. And I don't know how many inefficiencies there are. I think, for me, I think it's fine to know that stuff, but what you want to look at is observe the league, know some of that stuff as background, and then just kind of look at a few guys that you think have the situation and the capacity to do well, and try to target those guys to the extent that they're good values, and be a little aggressive. I know one mistake I made may not end up being a mistake, but at the time it was, because it wasn't my intention, was in that league I wanted Jordan Matthews, and I took Riley Cooper because I just thought, Jordan Matthews is going to slip a little bit. He'll be there next round, and then 3 picks later, Jordan Matthews was gone. And then at that point, I was like, screw it, I'm just going to go with my guys. And I took Marquise Lee probably 2 or 3 rounds earlier than he might have gone, I think. I have no idea, because I didn't want to, in round 10, 11, 12, start missing my players at that level where it doesn't really matter anymore, where it's just sort of a free-for-all. And I think
right. And I did the same with Tyler Eifert. That was one of my guys that I really wanted to make sure I got. I waited to get tight ends anyhow. I took Martellus Bennett in the 11th and Eifert in the 12th. I didn't care about going. I'm going back-to-back tight end, fine. It's okay. I'm going to miss out on some lottery ticket running back that I wanted. But at the same time, I feel strongly that he's a good breakout guy. Why not grab him now? I mean, again, like you said, same principle. 12th round pick, you got to take him when you want him there.
And the tricky thing about drafts is you don't know what's going to happen after your pick, right? I mean, auctions are tricky in different ways, but I think drafts are hard. People think, oh, auction is chess and drafts are checkers. I don't think so. Auction is kind of easy sometimes. I mean, you know who's left, and you know how much money you have. You don't know how much they're going to go for, but you kind of have an idea of what positions you can get later and what players you can target. I mean, that's pretty easy. Whereas in a draft, you have no idea, right? I didn't know Jordy Nelson wouldn't be there at 2-4. I really thought he was. I didn't think 100%. But I thought there was a 10% chance Julio Jones might slip. Who knows? He went like 2-1 or 2-2, or maybe it was 12. Sorry, 12. It might have been 112, but it was somewhere around. That wasn't that far away. And so you don't know how these things are going to go, and so you're making picks. And I said this example on the XM show today. When I was doing my baseball draft, I really wanted Jose Abreu in round 6 in my home league. I was on the end 15-team league, and I thought, you know what? I think Rizzo's going to be there in the next round, and I like Abreu a little better than Rizzo, but not that much better. But the catchers are going, I'm going to have to take Lucroy. Now, I took Lucroy instead of Abreu, which Abreu is probably a little better, but Lucroy's still good. And I got Rizzo on the way back. And that was that calculation I had to make based on just guessing what would happen. I happened to guess right in that case. But it could have easily been that Rizzo went the pick before me, and now I don't have either one of those guys, and I'm low on power. And right. I think you do the same thing all the time in football. You're saying, well, I guess I'll take him hoping this guy's there, and he's just simply not there. And so it's hard to really knock yourself too much for not being able to predict like what other people are going to do, because it's it's league by league, and it's circumstantial, and it's how the draft fell to them prior to that makes them make a different decision. Sometimes it's tough, especially when you're talking about the next 20